bowl from yesterday. Tell it's still a little bit damp, which is fine. This little ring that's going around here is the part that the bowl was sitting in the ground and the part that I built up. What we want to do is to increase our chances of success as much as we can when we fire this. So we want to make sure we make all the edges as round as we can, and we even out the walls as best we can. So I went out and I just gathered some stones, and what I'm going to try and do here is sand away a little bit of this ring that goes around it, and try and get this nice and even and smooth. And first I'm going to do the outside, then I'll do the inside. And the reason we kind of want to take a little bit care on this is we took some shortcuts in the collection of our clay and we didn't process it. So there might still be some rocks and stuff in here. And if there is a rock and it thins out the wall, our next step is, after we do this, is to add some more clay and wet it down and smooth it out and even it out that way too. So if we take a little bit too much, or if we get a gash in it, we can still fix it. One of the great things about clay is once you get a pot pretty much designed out, if you make any mistakes on the way, they're pretty easy to fix as long as you take your time. Of course, one of the downsides, one of the cons about doing primitive pots is sometimes when you're first starting out, or you're working with the clay you haven't worked with before, you took some shortcuts like this, you have to spend more time making more pots, because more of them are going to break during the firing process. And I'm actually, before I start that video, I want to try and make about 10 pots. 5 like this and 5 a different method. But I want to make about 10 pots and fire 10 pots and see how many comes out. Now, these by no means are a work of art, but they will function. And that's what we want. If you want to do primitive pots and make them look real nice, something you have to spend a lot of time doing and mastering the skill. But as far as making something functional, just a little bit of practice, going out and doing it a few times, and you'll have the basic idea. I am by no means an artist when it comes to any of my work I do. This is about as nice as it gets. And if you really wanted to, so I'm not really doing it, but all the fine clay you're scraping off, you could add that to water and make like a little clay paste. And after you go through this step and the next step, and you want to put a real fine, nice, fine layer on, you could use that and mix it in with the water and just rub it in. It'll create a real nice, fine layer of clay. It'll be real smooth. Now, making clay pots, in my view, is a good survival skill to have. Of course, the process usually takes a few days, so you will still need to be able to find a way to boil water in that time. So being able to make a burnout container or salvage something, some trash lying around to boil water in, it's still a very useful skill. But after that point, during that process, you can be working on a nice clay pot, or a few clay pots actually. You don't want to put all your money, put your eggs in one basket and just have one clay pot. You'll be able to make a few. But you can make a few clay pots, and after a few days of making the pots and smoothing them out and rounding them off and letting them thoroughly dry and then firing them, you'll have something that could hold a few cups of water. You can even make them bigger, but this is a pretty good size, and this is probably good 2, maybe 3 cups of water. Well, 2 cups, because you probably have to put some rock in there to boil it or put in the fire. So it's really not that bad. And if you go through the hassle of making 5 or 6 of them, hopefully you'll have 2 to 3 at the minimum that turns out good enough to boil water in. And after I get done with the series, I might do another video showing another way of making a larger container to boil a larger quantity of water in. I want to finish this portion of the clay series before I did that. It's a little lopsided on spots, like right here, but that's okay. Still working. It's looking pretty good. Got a little smaller rock, and I'm going to try and smooth out the inside and get some of the rough spots out. So there's some thin spots. It's not a big deal because we're going to be adding more clay in here to try and make the walls all even. By no means is this pot close from being done. Still has a lot of moisture in the clay. Now what I want to try and do is take the rock and real easily go over the rim right here and make sure it's rounded and maybe even it out a little bit. It'll also help me to tell where I need to add some clay because it's kind of thin up on top. I want everything to be as even as I can make it, so during the drying process it dries out more evenly, less chance of crack, and when I fire it, it will all fire evenly, less chance of having a dun spot and a spot on the pot where it didn't fire all the way. You don't have to go through, you don't have to do some of these extra steps, but the extra effort you put in now will pay off later. And you might as well do it because the pot's drying anyways. You're not really doing much with the pot anyways, unless you got more pots you want to work on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of clay on the outside here, and I'm going to add some clay on the inside, and some of these dimples are in here that are making thin spots on the pot wall here. And basically what I'm going to do is I went out and I collected some extra clay. Got this from the same spot I got that clay from, and got a little bit of water. Of course, if you don't have containers to put this in, you could just do this on the water's edge. And this is pretty easy, and the same principle would work if you had a small crack or maybe a chip came out. Is you take the water and you wet the clay in that area. Nice little slurry right there. All you're doing is wetting the outside. And then you take some clay and you just start rubbing it in. Basically all you do. And it will bind with the pot. Got some dimples right here. Have to smooth that a little bit. Take a little bit of clay right here and just let it do its thing. Bottom piece right in here. I'm just gonna by just doing the outside of the pot like this, I'm not really making the pot weaker, because it's only the outside of the clay is really getting hydrated. So it gives me a chance to really work on the pot real good without having to worry about making the walls collapse in, breaking it. So I'm going to let this dry on the outside for a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over and work on the inside. Here's our pot. We already worked on the back side here, or on the outside. Work a little bit on the inside. Looking pretty good. I think I might put a little bit more clay on some spot and try to even it out a bit better on the outside here. Still, it's looking pretty good. And basically all I'm going to do for the inside is the same thing I did for the outside. Take some water and wet the areas where I want to add some clay. Plus there's a big thin spot right here. I want to add quite a bit of clay right there. And there's no little pebbles in the clay. And all we're doing here is pushing it down in here. I'm going to start smoothing it out. This is all I'm going to do all the way around the pot until I thicken up all the thin areas. Now I'm going to work on the outside again. Of course, as you add this moisture, you have to make sure you be careful. What I think I'm going to do is just set it down right here. And I'm basically going to go over it like I did last time. Even it out a little bit more. Every little bit helps. I'm pretty happy with this as it is. I think I'm going to let it just sit out in the shade and let it dry up. And then this evening I'll probably put it out in the sun. So here's our dried pot. You guys a close up here. Bad angle on the sun, I'm sorry. And this is the one we did the mold in the ground. Pretty easy. We sanded it down, took out the rough spots with a rock, wetted it down, shaped it a little bit better, rounded off the corners here, trying to make it round and even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some more of these, and in the next video we'll fire them, see how many comes out. If you do the molded pots in the ground, like I said earlier, make sure you just don't do one, do a few of them. And if you could dig out one hole, you could dig out 2 holes. And you could do 3 pots at once, take them out, let them dry, fix them up, have 3 more pots in there. And once those dry enough to take them out, fix them up, now you got 6 pots you could fire. And that's pretty good odds of getting 1 to 2 that will last the firing.